They are the most incarcerated group on earth, and when video of George Floyd's death shocked the world, it left some in Australia self-reflective. Britt Clennett files this in-depth report on the decades-long Aboriginal fight for dignity and a warning. Some of the footage in this story is disturbing.
Come to the door, place your hands through the door. You're going to be handcuffed and moved to another cell. Fail to comply with any of my directions may result in the use of force.
David Dungay Jr., 26 years old, forcibly moved from his jail cell in Australia because he wouldn't stop eating biscuits. What happened next shocked a nation.
He was eating some biscuits and he'd had some sort of altercation with the guard.
Several guards, each identified by a letter and video released by the prison, restraining his body, his life slowly slipping away.
You can see him being subdued by police officers, shouting, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," and it seems to fall on deaf ears.
Those haunting yet familiar words.
It's very devastating for all us families to hear that cry. How can they be so cruel?
David becoming unresponsive minutes after he was apprehended by guards. He was pronounced dead roughly an hour after that.
If those guards had just seen David's humanity, when he was begging for his life, he could have lived.
I'll tell you the story, the real story.
Latona Dungay has been fighting for reform since she lost her son while he was detained in Sydney's Long Bay prison 6 years ago.
And I will do anything to get justice.
She's been another torchbearer in a painfully long fight against what statistics show is suffocating systemic racism impacting Aboriginal Australians.
I'm speaking for David, he can't speak no more. And I know he'd want me to continue to keep busy and keep things going, make sure all our people safe again.
But it was events that unfolded on the other side of the world in 2020 in the United States that changed the course of her campaign.
I can breathe.
That desperate plea striking a chord deep within Latona.
I could pair them because they both had the same cries and they had the same colour.
Moving her to lend her solidarity to the Black Lives Matter movement in the US.
It's the same thing from Long Bay to the USA. It's black faces. It's black deaths. It's the same excuses coming from these same systems.
Down under, Floyd's death felt too familiar, galvanising tens of thousands to the streets.
When you saw the images of those police officers putting their weight on George Floyd until he passed away, and you compare it to David's death, it's incredibly similar. And I think Australians suddenly connected the dots.
They look like such happy kids.
Yeah, they were. And that's where he got diagnosed diabetes.
David was a diabetic who was diagnosed with psychological issues. He was serving out sentences for a home invasion and other offences at Long Bay.
Go, go, go.
When he got into an altercation with a guard who tried to stop him from eating biscuits or cookies, saying they feared he'd go into a diabetic coma. Other guards were brought in to move David into another cell for monitoring. They held David face down while he was sedated. The body-worn video chronicling David's last moments was shown in a coroner's court during a 2018 investigation. That state inquest from his death found that David died from cardiac arrhythmia, as well as other factors including his diabetes, antipsychotic medication and acute stress.
If the guards had just gone into his cell and taken the biscuits, he'd still be alive today. He was presenting no risk to anyone. They hung on to David for 9 minutes. And it was that delay that ultimately, and the weight that was on his back that ultimately caused his death.
The inquest found that officers weren't adequately trained, responded inappropriately to the incident, and improvements to the system should be made. But no one seen in this video was disciplined.
Dungay.
They should be punished. You'd get charged if you went and done that to a dog. It's life they took away.
Your son's life?
My son's life. They took his breath away.
Corrective Services of New South Wales issued a statement to ABC News, reading in part, "We acknowledge there were operational practices in use at that time of Mr Dungay's death at Long Bay Hospital in December 2015 that may have contributed to his death, and we have since made changes to policy and training procedures as a direct result." David's story is one of many tragic stories of Aboriginal Australians in the country's criminal justice system. In 2004, 17-year-old Thomas TJ Hickey fell off his bike and was impaled on a fence in Sydney's inner suburb of Redfern.
Police were patrolling, the young lad went past them. They continued on in their patrol, but he, for some reason, accelerated on his push bike.
Hickey had an outstanding warrant, but police denied they were pursuing him at the time. The teenager's death sparked one of the biggest race riots in recent Australian history. In 2018 in Western Australia, friends Christopher Drage and Tris Jack Simpson drowned as they were fleeing police, who suspected they broke into houses. And this past November, Stanley Russell was shot dead by police at his aunt's home in Sydney while being served an outstanding warrant.
He wasn't a bad man at all.
Indigenous Australians represent just 3% of the population, but make up 30% of the prisoner population, making them among the most jailed people in the world. A 1991 Royal Commission found that while Indigenous people were no more likely to die in prison, they were far more likely to be arrested and sent to prison. 30 years on, nearly 500 have since died in custody.
There's been no convictions ever from an Indigenous person dying in custody or any kind of police incident.
People don't understand that there is this entrenched systemic racism that runs throughout our justice system.
To understand how we got here, Australia's historically shadowy policies towards Indigenous Australians play a key role.
In the last 100 years or so, what we had done as white Australians is go in and take control of the lives of young children, take them away from their parents and put them into state custody or to church custody. And these became the stolen generations.
The Australian government has acknowledged the pain of Indigenous Australians. In 2008, former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd made a landmark speech saying what so many First Nations people had waited to hear.
For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry.
It's been 13 years since the apology, but Rudd says there's still so much work to do at all levels to prevent deaths in custody.
It takes political will, commitment and investment to ensure that the actual spaces themselves are safe for incarcerees. It is that absence of, frankly, high-level political and bureaucratic commitment and, in my judgment, accountability for what's gone wrong that lies at the base of the problem with Aboriginal deaths in custody.
With no official held responsible in her son's death, Latona is taking David's case to the United Nations.
She said to me, "George, we're not getting anywhere in this country. We're going to have to embarrass the Australian government and take them offshore."
Find the defendant guilty.
In April 2021, George Floyd's killer, Derek Chauvin, was convicted in his murder. Latona hopes to see some justice for her son too.
Floyd got a chance, and my son could have a chance.
How do you want David to be remembered?
I just want him to be remembered that he was a human being, and he was going to come out to be a good man, and just hope that I get accountability.
Britt Clennett, ABC News, Sydney, Australia.
Just heartbreaking for Latona and her family. Our thanks to Britt for that. And a spokesperson for the United Nations Human Rights Committee told ABC News that Latona's petition is currently being assessed. They have not yet made a determination to take on her case.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.